G'day, welcome back to Fading Margins. Well, this is it, the long-awaited, promised video, Proper Preparation Prevents Piss Poor Performance in the Forthcoming Winter of Our Discontent. The press has painted a pretty bleak picture of what may happen in the winter, much as they did with COVID and various other things. They like a sort of an apocalyptic end of the world sort of scenario. And that doesn't really appeal to me because I'm kind of take it as it comes. I'm not a prepper. I don't do survival videos. I don't really go out to. I go out to enjoy myself in the countryside. I don't go out to practice survival right, I'm going to practice doing this now in case I break my leg while I'm out enjoying myself. If I break my leg, I'll have to deal with it at the time. Generally speaking, I find that circumstances find you when you least expect them. And a lot of what you have to deal with is your own emotional response to that event. So to that end, the first thing I did was to decide I wasn't going to contrive a setting and go and find a piece of woodland hereabouts and light a stove and put a billy on and all the rest of it, because it doesn't really apply. What applies in this circumstance is just a bit of common sense advice, which most of you will probably not need. As to things, that preparations I've made to make my life more comfortable should some aspect of the infrastructure fail. So I think, where do you start? Well, I always start as I did when I was breeding dogs, and when I was a little kid I bred mice and I kept chickens for eggs, and when I had two small boys with my wife, the cardinal principle about mammals, and birds come to that, most mammals, well, it's not whales and things, but is that they need to be warm and sheltered. And that's a relative term because some need more shelter than others, right? They need to be fed and watered, okay? And by and large, especially amongst us terrestrial animals, you need to be dry, okay? So if you're keeping, whatever you keep, if you keep them in an animal in damp conditions, you keep kids in damp conditions, keep yourself in damp conditions, it's not going to work out very well. You add cold to that and wind to that, and it gets very ugly very quick. Add hunger and thirst to that, and you've got a recipe that's only going one way. So let's start with warm and sheltered. Well, here's an object lesson in itself. The season has changed here in the UK almost overnight. It went. I had my tomatoes. I've got a small garden, very modest, couple of beds, and I grow some salad greens. I grow some kale, and I grow some spinach. And that's good advice. If anybody who considers themselves an outdoorsman or an outdoorswoman, anybody who wants to have a degree of preparedness about them, ought to be growing something, because it's cheap and it's not necessarily easy, but the sun does all the work, and all you got to do is add the water and keep the bugs off. All right, I had some tomatoes outside, going back to my story, and overnight, one cold night, bang, all dead. And that's the way the season's run. I don't know if it's going to continue like this. I don't know if, come October we're suddenly going to have an Indian summer. But as you can see, I've got my merino gilet on, my merino vest. And I think that's the first thing. Look to yourself, look to your family. Have we got enough clothes to keep everybody warm and dry, to get them from A to B, right? There was a guy, they interviewed an old guy, I think it was on the BBC, I can't remember now. And they were looking for a sort of victim response. What are you going to do, with power and all the rest of it? He said, well, I'll just, use a little bit less power and put more clothes on. And then what are you going to do then? I'm just going to get on with it. And that's all you can do. So my first piece of advice is look to yourself. When I say yourself, I mean you and your family. And make sure that you've got enough appropriate clothes, enough layers. Wool is great. Merino's better. Merino wool's better. But if you can't afford merino, then go with what you can afford. Okay? If you're going to be going out of doors, you don't, in cold, wet conditions, you don't want to be wearing cotton or linen or anything like that. In the summer, on a hot day, that's probably the best thing to wear, despite what the manufacturers will tell you, who want to sell you sort of polyester and call it technical fabric. Okay, so you don't need to spend up big, but you do need to make sure you're prepared in that regard. In the West, we use a lot of power. Power is the big deal. Power is why, you know, we're all paying big price now for our gas and our electricity, because basically the energy source has been cut off to us with the whole business with Russia and Ukraine. And one thing and another, I'm not getting into it, but what I'll say is, you know, we like to use energy. We use a lot of energy. We use electricity to power our phones, to make our videos, to light the room, to heat the house, all sorts of things, right? So you've got to look at that and say, well, wearing more clothes is an option, right? Acclimatizing yourself is an option. I shower in cold water, not exclusively, but I practice showering in cold water, so that in the event, that would be something that wouldn't be completely unfamiliar to me, right? Drinking water from the tap rather than making a brew every single time, right? I know somebody who, to save power, she boils a full kettle of water, she puts the rest in it, she makes a cup of tea, and she puts the rest in a thermos. Right? These are little things, right? But just start being aware of how much power, electricity, how much energy you're actually using to keep yourself going, and then try and augment that. So instead of turning up the thermostat in the house, put on an extra garment. Don't go around barefoot, this sort of thing. Lighting. It distresses me whenever I see, one of those space pictures of the world. Because I love the dark. I don't love the dark like darkness as a metaphor for evil, but I love the dark. You know, being able to walk around in the dark. If I go into my bedroom at night, I don't turn the light on. I just find my way. You know, I like to go outside. I love to see the stars. And by and large, I live in the country. You still can't see the stars. There's so much light pollution. So we can do without a lot of lighting. But you need to think to yourself, if the power goes out, it'll go out when I don't expect it. So you need to make preparations. So to that end, I've got a couple of hurricane lamps, some Fure hand lamps. I've got a couple of gas-operated lamps with the screw-in bottoms. Picked them up. They've got it's a bit of a trick to get the mantle right, and not to break the glass. They're a bit delicate, but you have to know where they are and have it all set out so that you can go, right, I know where that is. I'm going here. I can reach up. I can pull down a candle. I've always got a lighter on me because I always carry one. Bang. Right, now I've got some light. Now I can go about expanding that. I don't have to sit in a room blazing with light, but I've got enough to go about my business. Head torches. Head torches are a great thing, right? There was a chap went round the world on a bicycle. He wrote a book, I think, Love on a Bicycle, something like that. Young fella he was. And he became kind of an expert. He cycled around the world, met a girl, fell in love, left her, went back to her, married her. He's a good lad, right? But one of the things he said was, it's not about getting fit. It's because you'll get fit in the process of what you're doing. He's talking about cycling. It's about doing without refrigeration. It's about doing without being able to turn on a light all the time. You know, he said, get rid of your fridge, get rid of your TV, get rid of all those things. Practice sleeping on the floor, right? Practice reading by torchlight. These are the things that will really drive you nuts. Which brings me neatly to refrigeration. And brings me to fed and watered. Let's do watered first. I use US gallon 4 litre containers. And when we had the heat wave, I had 3 or 4 of those sitting on the kitchen top, full, ready to go, clean tap water. In fact, I think 2 or 3. One of them's gone back out to the car. I gave one to one of my boys because he got a new car, and he, said, you need to deck this out. You should always carry water in your car. And I still got 2 on the kitchen top. I think I'll probably get told to move them at some point in the not too distant future. Always good to have some water laid by, because it's going to be cold. You know, you're not out in the Sahara, so you're not going to be drinking 4 litres at a time. But you never know. pipes could freeze. I used to get that on a regular basis. In fact, the house we used to live in, it had a pipe. The pipe came up out of the ground into the house. In the house, it came up out of the ground. We used to have a thermostatically controlled fan heater pointing at it. It was turned right down to about, I think, 5 degrees. So it would come on and keep that little space at 5 degrees, which would stop the pipe from freezing. And there's nothing you could do because it was coming in underground. It was freezing as it came out of the ground. So you're just keeping it just warm. So yeah, pipes freeze. I've still got 8 to 12 litres of water sitting on the kitchen top that I can use. You get a notification that the water's not safe. I've got a supply of water purification tablets, and I've got the means to boil water. Okay, how do you go about that? Well, you start with something, bearing in mind that your saucepans that you use on your stove are going to be really heavy. You might want to invest in a lighter weight container, but I've got one of these, one of my many stoves. This is a pocket rocket, okay, and that's just screws onto a gas canister. And here's a little tip for you. If you go shopping for gas canisters and you buy the little baby ones, the little ones are about this big, that fit inside your jet boil, for example, they'll charge you, around here, they'll charge you about a $5 for them. If you buy the big ones that don't fit in your jet boil, which are about that size, got one here? No, I haven't. Sorry, guys. They'll charge you a $5 for them, but you're getting more gas. So I always opt, and the shop where one of the local shops was doing an offer. It was like something crazy. So it was, if you wanted a small one, it was $4.99. If you wanted a big one, it was $4.99. But if you bought 6 of the big ones, you could have them for 20 odd pounds. It was crazy. So of course I did, because that means, you know, I've got one in my car. I've got a number spare, and you know, there's no point spending money for that which you're not getting, is it? You know what I mean? So you'll have camping stoves. Most of you guys will invariably have camping stoves. If you've got a Trangia, something like that. The gas fitting is great. Just be aware that all our gear generally is designed and sold to you on the expectation you're going to use it out of doors. So, and I'm not telling you to do otherwise. But if you were to use something indoors, then you need to make sure that you've got really good ventilation. And even an alcohol stove, a little alcohol burner, will stink out a kitchen pretty quick. Okay, so look at your equipment. Look at how you can use it. How you can, where you can use it. You know, it may be that you have a space out of doors that you can take to cooking in, that is sheltered and out of the wind. It may be that you end up starting to prepare your food, in the woodshed or something, I don't know. Which brings me neatly to another thing I wanted to talk about, which was wood. As you've seen in my videos, when we bought this little bungalow, I insisted, as I did when we lived in a tied house, that there be a wood burner. Not because I love a wood fire, right? Don't get me wrong. No qualms about that. Absolutely. But here's the thing: with a wood burner, you can buy in some wood. You can stockpile that. And you don't have to use it if you don't want to. Okay. Or if you live in the country like me, you could go pick up sticks, right? But you can use it. And if the power goes out, now in my case, I've got a gas boiler I've got a big gas canister at the back. Looks like an old atom bomb, right? So you think, cool, great. So my heating's secure, right? The stove and everything is electric, but if the electricity goes out, the gas boiler goes with it. So if the electricity goes out, the gas goes out, the heating goes with it, and the cooking. So you've got to see how things are interconnected. So to that end, I have a wood burning stove. Part of our being prepared is being in a position to offer comfort and offer succor to other people who are not prepared, who are in need, your neighbours around you.